Queen Zarathil stood on the bridge of her massive warship, the Eternal Dawn, her 4 arms crossed behind her back as she looked out at the burning remains of another world. The planet below had once been home to millions of beings. Now it was nothing but ash and rubble. The Velthari Queen was tall, nearly 8 feet in height. Her skin was a deep purple color that seemed to shimmer in the light. 2 large eyes dominated her face, glowing with an inner fire that had struck fear into countless enemies. Her biomechanical armor covered most of her body, powered by technology. That was far beyond what most races could understand. "Another victory, my queen," said General Kethver as he approached. The older Velthari warrior bowed his head in respect. The Kortari put up more of a fight than expected, but they fell. "Just like all the others." Zarathil nodded slowly. "How many challenged me this time?" 7 of their best warriors, my queen. They came at you one by one, then all together. None lasted more than a few minutes." The queen turned away from the view of the destroyed planet. For 300 years, she had led her people across the galaxy. They had conquered world after world, always following the same pattern. First came the demand for surrender. Then came the challenge. It was an old tradition among the Velthari. Their queen could only be married to someone who could defeat her in single combat. For centuries, alien races had sent their strongest warriors to face her. They came seeking to win freedom for their people by defeating the unconquerable queen. None had succeeded. The silicon-based Krillians had sent their warrior priests, beings made of living rock who could crush steel with their bare hands. The psychic Nethari had offered their mind-shapers creatures who could bend reality with their thoughts. Even the advanced Zephyrians had sent their enhanced super-soldiers, warriors rebuilt with the finest technology their race could create. All had fallen before Zarathil's superior skill and power. "Set course for the next system," she commanded. "The intelligence reports suggest rich worlds there. Worlds that will make fine additions to our empire." "Yes, my queen," General Kethver replied. He paused for a moment. "The scouts report something interesting about the next region of space. There appears to be a young race there. They call themselves humans." Zarathil raised one eyebrow. "Humans? I have not heard of them. They are relatively new to space travel, only a few hundred years. But they have spread to many worlds quickly. The scouts say they fight well for such a young race." "All races fight well when they are desperate," the queen said with a cold smile. "Prepare the fleet. We move to human space within the week." Far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office on the Outer Rim colony of New Haven. The small human settlement was quiet today, but Jake knew that could change quickly. His job was to watch for threats coming from deep space, and lately he had been seeing disturbing reports. Jake was 35 years old, with brown hair and green eyes. He was not the biggest or strongest human in the fleet, but he had earned his rank through years of hard fighting in the Centauri Wars. He was known for his quick thinking and his ability to find solutions when things seemed hopeless. The door to his office opened, and Lieutenant Susan Davis walked in. She carried a data pad and looked worried. "Captain, we just received this transmission from Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7, she said, handing him the pad. Jake read the report quickly. His face grew serious as he absorbed the information. "Velthari scout ships?" "3 of them, sir. They were spotted near the edge of human space 2 days ago. The monitoring station lost contact with them after that." Jake had heard stories about the Velthari Empire. Everyone in human space had heard the stories. An unstoppable force that had conquered half the known galaxy, led by a queen who had never been defeated in battle. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "This is bigger than anything we can handle out here." Within hours, the report had reached the highest levels of Earth's government. Admiral Robert Chion sat in the war room deep beneath Earth's capital, studying the intelligence reports with growing concern. "How much do we know about their capabilities?" he asked his aide. "Everything we know comes from refugees from other races." The aide replied, "The Velthari fleet is massive. Thousands of ships, all more advanced than anything we have. but they follow a strange pattern when they attack. What kind of pattern? They always offer a challenge first. Their queen will fight any champion in single combat. If the champion wins, the world goes free. If the champion loses, the world becomes part of their empire. Admiral Chun frowned. And how many champions have won? None, sir, not in 300 years. The room fell silent as the weight of this information sank in. Humanity had fought hard to earn its place among the stars. They had survived wars, disasters, and challenges that would have destroyed weaker races. But they had never faced anything like this. 3 days later, the Velthari fleet arrived at Earth. Hundreds of massive warships dropped out of hyperspace around the planet. The alien vessels were beautiful and terrible at the same time, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor and weapons that could destroy cities. Earth's orbital defenses opened fire immediately, but their weapons barely scratched the alien hulls. Within hours, every human weapon platform had been destroyed or disabled. The Velthari had not even bothered to return fire. Then came the message. Queen Zarathal's face appeared on every screen across Earth. Her alien features were striking and intimidating, but her voice was clear and strong as she spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth," she began, "I am Queen Zarathal of the Velthari Empire. Your world now stands at a crossroads. You may choose to surrender and become part of our empire, serving us as countless races have done before you. Or you may choose to send your greatest warrior to face me in single combat." She paused, letting her words sink in across the planet. "If your champion defeats me, your people will go free, and we will leave your space forever. If your champion falls, as all others have fallen, then humanity will serve the Empire for all time. You have 1 day to decide." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. In government buildings around the world, leaders began the most important debate in human history. Who could possibly stand against a queen who had never known defeat? The emergency meeting in Earth's command center had been going on for 6 hours. Military leaders from every nation sat around a large table, arguing about who should face the alien queen. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on everyone. In the room, General Patricia Hayes slammed her hand on the table. "We have to send Colonel Lisa Grant. She's our best Special Forces operative. 30 years of combat experience, and she's never lost a fight." Admiral Robert Chun shook his head. "Grant is good, but she's still just human. We need to send Commander Alex Turner. His cybernetic enhancements make him stronger and faster than any normal person." "Both of you are thinking too small," said Defense Minister Karen White. "We should send multiple champions. The Queen didn't say it had to be just one person." "The historical records are clear," interrupted Dr. Helen Park, the alien culture expert. "Every race that has tried sending multiple warriors at once has failed. The Velthari combat rules are strict. One champion against the Queen, nothing more." Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly in the corner of the room, studying reports on his datapad. He had been called to the meeting because of his experience with alien races during the Centauri Wars, but mostly he just listened as the others debated. "What about you, Captain Morrison?" Admiral Chun asked. "You fought aliens before? What do you think?" Jake looked up from his pad. "I've been reading every report we have about the Velthari Queen. Every battle, every duel, every champion. Who has faced her, and what did you find?" General Hayes asked. "Every single champion who fought her used the same basic approach. They tried to match her strength with strength, her speed with speed, her technology with better technology. The Krillian rock priests were stronger than her, but she was smarter. The Nithari mind shapers had better psychic powers, but she adapted faster. The Zephyrian super soldiers had advanced weapons, but she had better tactics." Jake stood up and walked to the large screen showing images of previous battles. "Look at this. Every single fight follows the same pattern. The champion tries to overpower her, and she finds a way around their advantage." "So what are you suggesting?" Dr. Park asked. "I'm suggesting that maybe we're thinking about this wrong. Maybe we shouldn't try to beat her at her own game. Maybe we should change the game entirely." The room fell silent. General Hayes frowned. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Jake turned to face the group. Humans are different from every other race that has faced her. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, but we have something else. We adapt, we survive. We find ways to win when winning should be impossible. Admiral Chun leaned forward. That's all very inspiring, Captain, but the Queen has been undefeated for 3 centuries. She's not going to fall to inspirational speeches. I'm not talking about speeches, Jake replied. I'm talking about changing how we approach the entire challenge. What if we sent someone who didn't try to overpower her? What if we sent someone who made her think differently about the fight itself? And who exactly would that be? General Hayes asked. Jake took a deep breath. Me? The room erupted in protests. Absolutely not, Admiral Chun said immediately. Captain, with all due respect, you're a fine officer, but you're not our strongest fighter. That's exactly the point, Jake replied. She's expecting our strongest fighter. She's prepared for our strongest fighter. But what if we don't give her what she's expecting? Dr. Park studied Jake with interest. You're thinking of using psychological warfare. I'm thinking of using human nature, Jake corrected. Every report shows the same thing. The Queen is incredibly skilled, but she's also curious. She's been fighting the same types of opponents for centuries. What happens when she faces something completely different? General Hayes stood up. This is ridiculous. We can't risk the future of humanity on some crazy theory. We're already risking it, Jake pointed out. Every other approach has failed. Every champion who has tried to beat her at her own game has lost. Maybe it's time to try something new. Admiral Chung was quiet for a long moment. Even if we agreed to this insane plan, the Queen would have to accept your challenge. She might just refuse to fight you. The Velthari Code of Honor is very clear, Dr. Park said slowly. Any member of the challenged race can step forward as champion. The Queen cannot refuse unless the challenger is clearly not acting in good faith. But Jake, Admiral Chung continued, you would almost certainly lose. The Queen has abilities far beyond any human, Jake nodded. Probably. But if I'm going to lose anyway, at least let me lose on my own terms. Let me try something that's never been tried before. The debate continued for another 2 hours. In the end, it was Jake's own determination that won the day. He pointed out that the Queen's message had not specified that Earth's government had to choose the champion. Any human could volunteer. If you won't officially send me, then I'll go on my own, Jake said. The Queen will still accept the challenge, and at least humanity will have tried something different. Admiral Chun finally gave in. This is against my better judgment, but I can see you're going to do this with or without our approval. At least this way, we can give you whatever support we can. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Jake studied everything available about Velthari culture and combat. He learned about their weapons, their fighting styles, and their concept of honor. Most importantly, he learned about Queen Zarathal herself. The records showed that while the Queen was ruthless in battle, she had shown mercy to opponents who displayed particular courage or honor. She had spared the lives of several champions who had impressed her. Even though she had defeated them, Jake began to form a plan. It was risky and probably hopeless, but it was different from anything that had been tried before. Late that night, Jake recorded a message to be sent to the Velthari fleet. In it, he formally challenged Queen Zarathal to single combat, following all the proper protocols that Dr. Park had taught him. The response came within an hour. The Queen's image appeared on the screen, and Jake could see amusement in her alien features. Captain Jake Morrison of Earth, she said. I have reviewed your military record. You are competent, but hardly your species' greatest warrior. Are you certain you wish to face me? I am certain, Your Majesty, Jake replied. The Queen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Very well, we shall meet tomorrow at noon. Ship time aboard my flagship. Do not disappoint me, human. I have grown tired of easy victories. The transmission ended, and Jake was left alone with his thoughts. In less than 24 hours, he would face the most dangerous opponent in the galaxy. He knew he would probably die, but at least he would die trying something new. As he prepared his equipment and studied his notes one last time, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this duel would be different from all the others. Not because he would win, but because something else entirely might happen, something that no one, not even the unconquerable Queen herself, was expecting. The transport shuttle carrying Jake Morrison docked with the Eternal Dawn exactly at noon. As Jake stepped off the shuttle, he felt the artificial gravity of the massive alien ship pull at him. The corridors were huge, built for beings much larger than humans. Two Velthari guards escorted Jake through the ship. They were both over 7 feet tall, with the same purple skin and glowing eyes as their queen. Their weapons looked like they could punch holes through tank armor. Neither guard spoke to Jake during the long walk to the combat arena. The arena itself was enormous. Jake estimated it was at least 200 feet across and 50 feet high. The floor was made of some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light. Around the edges, thousands of Velthari soldiers sat in viewing galleries, all watching silently. In the center of the arena stood Queen Zara HL. Jake had seen her image on screens, but seeing her in person was different. She was even taller than he had expected, nearly 8 feet of pure muscle and alien grace. Her 4 arms moved independently as she checked her weapons. Her biomechanical armor covered most of her body, glowing with internal power sources. "Captain Morrison," she called out as Jake entered the arena. Her voice echoed in the vast space. "You are smaller than I expected." Jake walked to the center of the arena, carrying his simple equipment bag. "Sometimes the smallest packages contain the biggest surprises, Your Majesty." The Queen laughed, a sound like metal grinding against stone. "Indeed, I hope you will provide more entertainment than the last few champions." The Zephyrian super soldier lasted only 3 minutes. Jake set down his bag and began removing his equipment. A plasma rifle, standard Earth military issue, a combat knife. A few small devices that looked like grenades. The watching Velthari soldiers murmured among themselves. Compared to the Queen's advanced weapons, Jake's gear looked like primitive toys. "Is that all?" Queen Zarathil asked, genuine surprise in her voice. "Sometimes simple is better," Jake replied, checking his rifle's power cell. The Queen activated her own weapons. Energy blades extended from 2 of her hands, glowing with deadly light. A particle cannon unfolded from her armor's shoulder mount. 4 shields materialized around her arms. In seconds, she had become a walking weapon system. "The rules are simple," she announced. "We fight until one of us yields or dies. There are no other restrictions." She paused, studying Jake's calm expression. "You may begin when ready." Jake raised his plasma rifle and fired immediately. The bolt of energy struck the Queen's force shield and scattered harmlessly. She didn't even step backward from the impact. Instead, she began walking toward Jake at a steady pace. Her weapons charging, Jake fired again and again, his shots creating bright flashes against her shields but doing no real damage. When she was 20 feet away, the Queen's particle cannon fired. Jake threw himself sideways, rolling behind a raised section of the arena floor. The particle beam turned the metal where he had been standing into molten slag. The heat was so intense that Jake could feel it through his protective suit. "You cannot hide from me forever, human," the Queen called out. She fired again, and the beam cut through Jake's cover like it was made of paper. Jake ran to a different section of the arena, using the uneven floor to stay out of the Queen's direct line of fire, but he knew this couldn't last long. The arena was big, but not big enough to run forever. The Queen pursued him steadily, her longer legs eating up the distance between them. When Jake tried to fire at her again, she moved with incredible speed, her 4 arms working together to deflect his shots while keeping her own weapons trained on him. After 5 minutes of this deadly chase, Jake found himself backed against the arena wall. The Queen stood 30 feet away, all of her weapons pointed at him. "Surrender now, and I will make your death quick," she offered. Jake looked around the arena, thinking fast. The watching Velthari soldiers were leaning forward in their seats, expecting to see him destroyed at any moment. But Jake had noticed something during the chase. "Your Majesty," he called out, "may I ask you a question before I die?" The Queen paused, her weapons still ready to fire. "You wish to talk, now?" "Just one question," Jake said. "Why do you do this?" What do you mean? Jake gestured around the arena. The duels. The conquests. You're obviously powerful enough to just destroy any world you want. Why give them the chance to fight back? The Queen's glowing eyes narrowed. It is tradition, it is honor. But why do you personally choose to fight? Jake pressed. You could send your generals to do the conquering. You could stay safe on your flagship. Why do you always fight the champions yourself? For the first time since the duel began, Queen Zarathil hesitated. No champion had ever asked for such a question. They had all been too focused on trying to defeat her to wonder about her motivations. Because, she said slowly, a true leader must be willing to risk everything for her people. Even when you know you'll win? Jake asked. The question hung in the air between them. The Queen realized that Jake was right. She had not faced a real challenge in decades. Every duel had become a ritual, a ceremony where the outcome was never in doubt. Are you trying to distract me with philosophy? She asked, raising her weapons again. No, Jake replied. I'm trying to understand you. He reached into his equipment bag and pulled out one of his small devices. But instead of throwing it at the Queen, he tossed it into the air above his own head. The device exploded in a burst of bright light and sound. Jake had used a flashbang grenade on himself. The Queen fired instinctively, but Jake had already moved. Blinded and deafened by his own grenade, he stumbled across the arena floor, using the confusion to get closer to the Queen. When the light faded, Jake was standing just 10 feet from Queen Zarathil. His plasma rifle was pointed at the ground. His hands were empty except for his combat knife. I could have tried to hurt you when you couldn't see, he said quietly, but I didn't. The Queen stared at him. In 300 years of duels, no champion had ever deliberately given up an advantage. No one had ever chosen not to attack when they had the chance. Why? She asked. Because hurting you wouldn't prove anything, Jake replied. And because I'm not here to beat you? I'm here to show you something different. Different how? Jake looked up at the thousands of Velthari soldiers watching from the galleries. When was the last time you fought alongside someone instead of against them? The Queen's 4 hands tightened on her weapons. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe there's another way to be strong, Jake said. Maybe real strength isn't about being unbeatable. Maybe it's about what you choose to do with your power. For a long moment, the arena was completely silent. Queen Zarathil stood frozen, her alien mind processing ideas that were completely foreign to her upbringing and culture. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, she began to laugh. Not the cold, metal sound she had made before, but something warmer, something almost human. You are either the bravest human who ever lived, she said, or the most foolish. Probably both, Jake admitted. The Queen's laughter continued for several seconds. When it finally stopped, she looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. This duel is not finished, she announced to the watching crowd. But it will continue under different terms. She turned back to Jake. You have given me much to think about, human. We will speak again soon. The royal quarters aboard the Eternal Dawn were larger than most human homes. Jake sat on a chair that had been specially adjusted for his smaller size, still trying to process what had happened in the arena. Instead of declaring him defeated, Queen Zarathil had called the duel incomplete and ordered him brought here as her guest. The door opened, and the Queen entered, followed by 2 of her advisors. She had removed most of her combat armor and now wore simpler clothing that still managed to look regal. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she dismissed the guards with a gesture. General Kethver and Minister Yulandra, she said, introducing the 2 aliens who had followed her. My most trusted advisors, they have concerns about my decision. General Kethver was old for a Velthari, his purple skin marked with scars from countless battles. He looked at Jake with obvious disapproval. My queen, this human has not been defeated, but he has not won either. The law is clear. He should be declared a loser and his people enslaved. Minister Yulandra was smaller than the general but radiated an aura of intelligence and cunning. The other races in our empire are watching, she said in a smooth voice. If they believe you are showing weakness, they may rebel. Queen Zarethel settled into her own chair, which was massive compared to Jake's. And what do you think, Captain? Morrison? Should I follow the law and enslave your people? Jake had been thinking about this question ever since leaving the arena. I think laws should serve the people who live under them, not the other way around. If a law makes things worse, for everyone, maybe it's time to change the law. General Kethver snorted. Spoken like someone who has never had to maintain order across 1,000 worlds. Laws exist for good reasons, human. I agree, Jake said, surprising the general. But what's the good reason for this law? Why does the Queen have to fight every champion alone? To prove that she is the strongest, Minister Yolandra replied immediately. Strength is the foundation of our empire. But she's already proven that, Jake pointed out. 300 years of victories. Everyone knows she's the strongest. So what is she really proving now? Queen Zarethel leaned forward, interested. Continue. Maybe the law made sense when your empire was young, Jake said. When people needed to see that their leader was strong enough to protect them. But your empire is huge now. You don't need to prove your strength anymore. You need to prove your wisdom. The room fell silent. General Kephar's face darkened with anger, but Minister Yolandra looked thoughtful. You are suggesting that the Queen should simply stop fighting challengers? The minister asked. I'm suggesting that maybe there are different ways to show leadership, Jake replied. On Earth, we have a saying, the best generals are the ones who win wars without fighting them. Queen Zarethel stood and walked to the large window that showed the stars outside. Tell me about human leadership, Captain. How do your people choose their rulers? Jake explained the concept of democracy, of leaders who serve their people instead of ruling them. He talked about how human governments changed peacefully when the people wanted new leadership. The three Velthari listened with fascination and disbelief. Your leaders give up power voluntarily? General Kethver asked. That seems like madness. It seems like strength to me, Jake said. It takes more courage to step down when your people ask you to than it does to hold on to power by force. Over the next several hours, the conversation ranged across many topics. Jake found himself telling stories about human history, about times when people had worked together to overcome impossible challenges. He spoke of the colony ships that had traveled for generations to reach distant stars, of communities that had survived disasters by helping each other instead of fighting. Queen Zarethel asked many questions. She wanted to know how humans resolved conflicts without violence, how they made decisions that affected entire planets, how they maintained loyalty without fear. Your people sound weak, General Kethver said at one point. All this cooperation and discussion. How do you get anything done? We get things done because everyone wants to help, Jake explained. When people choose to follow a leader, they work harder than when they're forced to obey? But what about enemies? Minister Yolandra asked. Surely you fight those who threaten you? Of course we fight when we have to, Jake said. But we try to make allies instead of enemies whenever possible. It's easier to defend yourself when you have friends helping you. The Queen was quiet. For a long time after that, finally, she spoke. General, tell me about the rebellion in the Centauri sector. General Kethver straightened. The Zephyrians have stirred up trouble on 17 worlds. They claim that your mercy toward this human shows weakness. They demand independence. And your recommendation? Crush them immediately. Make an example that will prevent other rebellions. Queen Zarethel turned to Jake. What would you do? Jake thought carefully before answering. I would ask why they're rebelling. What do they want that they don't have? Maybe there's a way to give them what they need without losing control of the sector. Impossible, General Kethver said. They want freedom. We cannot give them that without destroying the Empire. Why not? Jake asked. What if freedom made them stronger allies than slavery makes them subjects? The question sparked a heated debate between the general and minister, with the Queen listening carefully to both sides. Jake noticed that she was not just hearing their words, but thinking about the ideas behind them. Late that night, After the advisors had left, Queen Zarathil and Jake continued talking alone. She asked him about his own life, his experiences in the Centauri Wars, his reasons for volunteering to face her. "I was not lying in the arena," Jake said. "I really did want to understand you. All the reports made you sound like a monster, but monsters don't build empires that last for centuries. I wanted to know what kind of person you really were." "And what have you concluded?" the Queen asked. Jake looked at her carefully. "I think you're tired. I think you've been fighting for so long that you've forgotten why you started. And I think you're looking for a way to stop fighting without admitting defeat." The Queen was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. "You may be right, human. But changing an empire is not as simple as changing a mind. Even if I wanted to rule differently, my people might not accept it. And other races might see change as weakness." "Change is always hard," Jake agreed. "But maybe you don't have to change everything at once. Maybe you could start small and see what happens." "What did you have in mind?" Jake smiled. "What if we solve the Centauri rebellion together? Not with force, but with negotiation? If it works, it could be a model for handling other problems." Queen Zarathil looked out at the stars again. "You would help me? Even knowing that I could still decide to enslave your people?" "Yes," Jake said without hesitation. "Because I believe you won't." The Queen turned to face him, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled without showing her teeth. "Very well, Captain Morrison. Let us see if your human ideas work in the real galaxy." 3 days later, alarms began sounding throughout the eternal dawn. Jake was in his quarters studying Valthari history when Lieutenant Commander Vextar burst through the door. "Captain Morrison, the Queen requests your immediate presence on the bridge," the young Valthari officer said. "We have received urgent reports from the Centauri sector." Jake followed the officer through the ship's corridors to the massive command bridge. Queen Zarathil stood at the center, her 4 hands dancing across holographic displays showing star maps and battle reports. General Kethver and Minister Yulandra flanked her, both looking grim. "The Zephyrian rebellion has spread," the Queen announced as Jake approached. 23 worlds now. They have declared the formation of something they call the Free Worlds Alliance. General Kethver pointed to the tactical display. "My Queen, I have assembled a battle fleet of 200 ships. We can crush this rebellion within a week and execute the leaders as an example to others." "How many people would die?" Jake asked quietly. The general turned to him with annoyance. "What does it matter? They are rebels." "It matters because they're still people," Jake replied. He looked at the star map, studying the rebel worlds. "Your Majesty, what exactly are the Zephyrians demanding?" Minister Yulandra activated another display. "They want local self-government, the right to keep their own defense forces, and reduce tribute payments to the Empire." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Those don't sound like unreasonable requests." "They are rebels," General Kethver said firmly. "Give them what they want, and every world in the Empire will make similar demands." "Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing," Jake said. The bridge fell silent. Every Valthari officer turned to stare at the human, who had just suggested dismantling their empire. Queen Zarathil studied the displays for a long moment. "Explain your thinking, Captain." Jake moved to the star map and gestured to the rebel worlds. "Look at where these rebellions are happening. They're all on the outer edges of your territory, far from the core worlds. These are places that have been part of your empire for decades, but they've never really been integrated." "Integration was never the goal," Minister Yulandra said. "Conquest and control were the goals. But what if integration had been the goal?" Jake asked. "What if these worlds felt like they were part of something bigger instead of just conquered territory?" General Kethver scoffed. "Feelings do not build empires, human." "Actually, they do," Jake replied. "The strongest human governments are the ones where people choose to participate. They work harder, fight more bravely, and stay loyal longer than people who are forced to obey." Queen Zarathil walked closer to the star map. "You are suggesting we negotiate with the rebels?" I'm suggesting we find out what they really want, Jake said. Maybe we can give them enough freedom to stop the rebellion without losing control of the sector. And if they refuse to negotiate? General Kethver asked. If they demand complete independence? Then we'll deal with that when it happens, the Queen said decisively. Prepare a small diplomatic fleet. We go to the Centauri sector not as conquerors, but as negotiators. The journey to Centauri took 2 days. During that time, Jake worked with Minister Yulandra to prepare negotiation strategies. They studied the rebel world's histories, their economic needs, and their cultural differences. Jake was impressed by the minister's quick understanding of diplomatic concepts that were foreign to Velthari tradition. The rebel fleet met them at the edge of the Zeta Centauri system. 50 Zephyrian ships faced the Queen's diplomatic escort. Of only 5 vessels, it was a clear show of the rebel strength and determination. Incoming transmission from the rebel flagship, reported the communications officer. On screen, Queen Zarathil commanded. The image that appeared showed a tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian with silver markings around her eyes. Jake recognized her from intelligence reports as Admiral Silanara, the leader of the rebellion. Queen Zarathil, Admiral Silanara said formally. I did not expect you to come here with so few ships. I came to talk, not to fight, the Queen replied. May we board your flagship under diplomatic protection? The Zephyrian admiral looked surprised. You want to negotiate? This is not like you, Queen. Perhaps it is time for me to try new approaches, Zarathil said. Will you grant us safe passage? 2 hours later, Jake found himself in the conference room of a Zephyrian warship. The rebel leaders sat on one side of a long table, while Queen Zarathil, Jake, and Minister Yulandra sat on the other. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Admiral Silanara spoke first. We know why you are really here, Queen. You want us to surrender before you destroy our worlds. Actually, I want to understand why you rebelled, Queen, Zarathil replied. What has the Empire failed to provide that you need? The question caught the rebels off guard. Admiral Silanara exchanged glances with her advisors before answering. We want the right to govern ourselves, to make decisions about our own worlds without asking permission from distant bureaucrats who have never visited our systems. What else? The Queen asked. We want to keep our own military forces for defense, said another rebel leader. And we want fair trade agreements instead of tribute payments that drain our resources. Jake leaned forward. Those sound like reasonable requests to me. They sound like the end of imperial authority, General Kethver muttered. But the Queen silenced him with a gesture. For the next 6 hours, they negotiated. Jake was amazed to watch Queen Zarathil adapt to diplomatic thinking. She asked probing questions, made thoughtful counteroffers, and gradually worked toward solutions that both sides could accept. The final agreement was revolutionary. The rebel worlds would become autonomous regions within the Empire, governing themselves but coordinating defense and trade through imperial channels. They would pay reduced tribute based on their actual ability to contribute, and they would maintain their own defense forces under overall imperial command. This is a dangerous precedent, General Kethver warned privately. Other worlds will demand similar arrangements. Good, Queen Zarathil replied. Let them ask. If these terms work for the Zephyrians, they might work for others too. The return. Journey to imperial space was quiet. Jake spent most of his time working with Minister Yulandra to draft formal proposals for restructuring the Empire's government. They called it the Autonomous Regions Plan, and it would fundamentally change how the Velthari ruled their territory. On the final day of the journey, Queen Zarathil called Jake to her private quarters. They sat together looking out at the stars, both lost in thought. Do you think this will work? She asked. I think it's worth trying, Jake replied. Change is always risky, but so is staying the same when the same isn't working anymore. The Queen nodded slowly. There is something else I want to discuss with you. When we return to imperial space, I will need advisors who understand these new concepts. People who can help me transform an empire built on conquest into something built on cooperation. Jake looked at her carefully. What are you asking? I am asking if you would stay. Not as a prisoner or a defeated champion, but as a partner in rebuilding what we have created. Jake thought about Earth, about his life there, about the career he would be leaving behind. Then he thought about the opportunity to help reshape an empire that controlled thousands of worlds and billions of lives. Double quotes. Yes, he said finally. I'll stay. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the ship, now called New Horizon, watching as another world's delegation arrived for autonomy negotiations. The Velthari Empire was changing, slowly but surely, from a military dictatorship into something more like a cooperative federation. Queen Zarethel joined him at the viewscreen. The Altarian delegation looks nervous, she observed. They're probably expecting you to challenge their champion to single combat, Jake said with a smile. The Queen laughed, the warm sound that Jake had learned to appreciate. Perhaps we should tell them that there are better ways to resolve differences than fighting. Perhaps we should, Jake agreed. As they watched the diplomatic shuttle approach, Jake reflected on how much had changed. The Queen who could not be defeated by any warrior had found herself conquered by something far more powerful than strength or skill. She had been conquered by the idea that true leadership meant building up rather than tearing down, creating rather than destroying, and Jake, the unlikely champion who had never expected to win, had achieved the greatest victory of all, not by defeating his opponent, but by helping her become something better than she had been before. The empire that had once spread fear across the galaxy was learning to inspire hope instead. And it all began with a simple question asked by a human. Who cared more about understanding than winning?